What issues are most important to voters on November 4th? Far and away the most important issue was the economy. 63% of voters chose that as their most important issue, and the second ranked one was Iraq, and that was only 10%, so that tells you a lot. How did 2008 differ from previous elections? Obviously a different outcome, but underneath that there are a lot of important changes that took place. One is just in the realm of turnout, who showed up at the polls. You had more young people showing up at the polls. You had more black voters. You had more Hispanic voters. In fact, minority turnout went up to 26% of the electorate in this election, which is just extraordinary. Back in 1988, it was only 15%. So clearly there's a lot going on in terms of who's coming out to vote these days, and it's really changing the shape of our electorate. Another important difference, obviously, is how did these different groups voted? And what we typically find looking at the election data is that growing groups, emerging groups, groups that are gaining strength in the electorate, generally voted much more progressive than they did previously. I mean, an example is Latinos. In 2004, they only had an 18-point advantage for the progressive candidate. In 2004, that doubled to 36 points, a 67-31 margin. Famously, young people were very, very enamored of the progressive candidate this time, and they gave him a 66-32 margin, 34 points. That's almost never been seen in the history of polling voters, that kind of a margin among an age group and particularly among youth. So that's just a tremendous change. And then there were lots of others as well. But the general theme is groups that were on the rise voted much more heavily progressive than they did in 2004, and that's part of what made the difference in this election. What are the public's priorities for the Obama administration? Way to read that is just look at the exit polls. As I said, 63% selected the economy as their most important issue. Iraq was secondary, but it's worth keeping in mind that one of the clearest things that differentiated people in the exit polls was whether they disapproved or not of the Iraq war. And people who disapproved of the Iraq war, who outnumbered those who approved by about 2-1, voted for the progressive candidate in overwhelming numbers. So that's important. There's been some recent data released that show that there's a long list of things that people think this administration is going to accomplish, which is actually very good for the incoming administration. It shows they have some confidence in what the Obama team had originally set out to do. The administration is going to make progress getting out of Iraq, improving the nation's schools, improving the nation's health care, dealing with the energy situation, improving America's relationships with other countries, and so on. Just a whole list of things that are integral to the campaign this year, and that the Obama administration is committed to doing. So the public is saying, we actually think progress can be made here. So that's an important thing, that the public not only has priorities for the new administration, but they have some confidence those priorities can be realized.